The date is January 30th, 2020. The location is North Muskegon, Michigan, the home of Rosemary Keefe. The time is 11:45 a.m. Today, the person being interviewed is Rosemary Malberg Keefe. Rosemary was born on July 19th, 1922. Rosemary worked at the Woodall Plant in Detroit, Michigan during World War II. This interview will be conducted by Claire Kitchen-Dahl. This interview is being videotaped by Claire Kitchen-Dahl. Observers present today are Kathy Lee. She is the daughter of Rosemary Keefe. This interview is being conducted on behalf of the Oral History Project at the Yankee Air Museum in Belleville, Michigan. Rosemary, thank you for allowing us to capture your memories of working at the Woodall Plant in Detroit during World War II. By preserving your story of working on the home front during the war years, our national narrative will be more complete, honest, colorful, and accurate. Primary documentation is vital to any study of that world conflict, and we appreciate your willingness to help fill in the gaps. Now, for the record, please give your name, including your maiden name.
Rosemary Malberg Keefe.
Great, and if you could speak up a little louder, it may help. Rosemary Malberg Keefe. And when were you born?
1922.
And that makes you now 97 years old, right?
Right.
And what are you planning for in a couple years?
A pig roast.
A pig roast for your 100th birthday, right?
Yes.
You're going to celebrate a 50th anniversary for your daughter and 100 years of birthday for you. A pig roast, that's great. Where were you born?
In Hart, Michigan.
On a farm?
On a farm.
Okay. Any particular, was there a midwife, or did your mother just have any help at all?
The doctor and the neighbor lady.
Good. All right. And what were the names of your parents?
Paul and Aurelia Malberg.
Okay, there it is. And the occupation of your parents? What was your father?
A farmer.
Was he a generic farmer, or was it a dairy farm, or?
Well, general farming.
General farming, all right. And you said at one point he also served as a butcher for relatives and friends and neighbors.
All the neighbors, whatever they needed to butcher, they would call my dad or come and get them.
So he was good at this.
He was very good at it.
And he liked it.
He liked it. They made good pork sausage too.
Oh, well, isn't that a nice memory? Pork
Blood
sausage.
Liver sausage. I have wonderful parents.
Did he sell this sausage to anybody?
No.
No, it was just all for you. And what about your mom? What was she? What did she do?
She was a great cook. She could make a pie for dinner in no time and had a cake for supper at night. And she loved to sew.
And you said you remember seeing her sewing on a white sewing machine.
A white sewing machine.
A treadle machine. Did she make your clothes?
Oh, I was the best dressed kid in school.
Oh, isn't that nice?
She used a lot of things that was given to her that had a lot of good fabric in it. And made me clothes that other kids in school wish for.
Isn't that nice? That's a nice memory. So she was a housewife, but a sewer, a cook, a gardener, everything.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, how many children were raised on this farm? How many siblings did you have?
There were 12.
12.
One passed away at 10 days old.
Okay, so 11 kids that you grew up with. There were 11 of you in that house.
Uh-huh.
And where were you in the lineup? Were you the oldest? Were you the baby?
I was number 8.
Well, number 8, that means you were in the middle, kind of. Were you spoiled?
In a way, everybody was good to me, but I don't think I was spoiled.
You had more brothers than sisters.
I had 8 brothers.
Okay, there it is. And this cute little girl there, and no wonder you were a little spoiled. And you said that you are the only one of these siblings alive today.
Yes,
Everyone else is gone, but they all lived good, long lives.
they all lived good lives.
Now, you said you thought that was because you all ate such good food.
My mother was a great cook. We had a balanced meals, chicken and everything. She balanced the meals, but we had all that vegetables, and we lived around a lot of fruit. We canned a lot. And so every day at dinner time at night, we would have cake and a dish of fruit. And for the middle of the day, we had a pie.
A pie in the middle of the day. Did any of you get very fat?
At dinner time in the middle of the day. She just loved to bake.
Well, she loved to bake. She loved to can. I know you said you canned cherries and peaches and
Everything
plums.
that grew.
Anything that grew. Unbelievable. Well, speaking of canning, you said that your father loved something called grape conserve. Now, what was that?
That was when you took your Concord grapes and you washed them. Did you squeeze the center out? You saved the skins, and then you cooked the center, and then run it through something that the pits came out, and you mixed it all together. Put a lot of sugar in it. That was delicious. Cooked it down, and he loved it on his homemade bread.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. So she was spoiling the whole family with all these things that she was making.
Oh, yes.
Everybody loved it. Now, you had a one-style or a ranch-style farmhouse. You had told me it was a nice big house with a big kitchen and a dining room.
Oh, man. The rooms were very large.
And did you share a bedroom with your other sisters?
My older sisters.
Okay.
My one sister was 4 years older than me, the youngest one. So she left home earlier. So I had the room to myself for a long time.
Well, see there, that goes back to you being that spoiled little girl. You have your own bedroom. I didn't even have my own bedroom growing up. I shared forever. You had a piano in your house.
Yes. It was given to my mother when her sister passed away in 1918, the great flu time. And so we had the piano, but nobody really had the money to take lessons.
Okay, so the piano was just there to be dusted.
Well, they corded on it.
Oh, okay.
And everybody sang and played the mouth organ and a juice harp, and we had a lot of fun.
Okay, that sounds great. Now, you also had a washing machine that was electric? Did
No.
you, or what, how did it work?
It was a wooden wash machine. It had these great big, the agitator had big round wooden things.
Mm-hmm.
And it was run by a gasoline engine.
Oh, a gasoline engine that kept
and a
this.
belt that went to the wash machine.
Okay.
And it washed and had a wringer, and you could swing the wringer around from one tub to the other.
Wow. So not only were you well fed, you were all clean and well dressed.
Yes, my mother did put out beautiful sheets, and white shirts, and they were just sparkle.
Now, you had a potbelly stove, or what kind of a stove did she have? What was she cooking
We
on?
had a range.
Oh, you did, okay.
And I think it would be nice if we could have one today, because it was always warm, and if we were cold, we opened the oven door.
Oh, that's a nice memory, too. That's great. You had no plumbing in the house. You had to use an outhouse.
We had to use an outhouse.
All right.
We had a flowing well that came to the basement, and then we pumped it up to the pantry, and we had to heat it.
Okay, good. So this is quite a functioning, a well-ordered, well-machined, oiled farm. It sounds like it's smooth running.
Well, we all got along very well.
And you didn't have to mow any lawn. How come?
Usually all the work was done out in the fields, and it was kind of sandy in front of our house.
Mhm.
The grass wasn't very thick, and they I don't know how they took it down.
Well, the cows also ate a lot of your grass too,
Well, they
right?
didn't eat in the yard, but along the road.
Along the road.
That was beautiful because they mowed it down.
And your dad had a hunting dog.
Yeah, he was a great hunter, and people from as far away as Muskegon, which was about 40 miles, would come up and want to go hunting with him, or they brought their young sons and said that I'm not going to let you go hunting until you hunt with Mr. Malberg.
Good. Well, that's something to say about his character, his leadership, his safety.
Well, wouldn't let anybody climb over the fence with a gun in their hand. He said that goes under the fence.
Absolutely. That's good. All right. Now, what about your schooling, your elementary school years, 1st through 8th grade? Where did you go to school?
I went to St. Joe's Catholic school. We walked 2 miles to school.
And
2 miles home. I was thinking the other day, 4 miles a day.
That's a lot. That keeps you all in shape. And the St. Joseph's Catholic Church is a big, beautiful church.
It's across the street. We went to Mass every day before we had class.
All right. This was a church built by the immigrants, came in.
Yes.
A beautiful church. And so you went to the school associated with this church.
Yes, it was a thing we did every morning.
Sure.
And anything that was, we went to a lot of funerals and weddings too because they had them in the morning.
Well, that's good. And you were taught by nuns.
Yeah,
And you said that your nuns were very nice.
I liked them.
You liked them a lot. Good, good. So the younger children were in one room, grades 1, 2, 3, then 4, 5, 6, and then the 7th and 8th graders had to get ready for the high school. They had to pass the county test.
Yeah. Yes.
So you and all of your siblings went to school there.
Yes, we did.
All right. Then high school. You went to high school in Hart, Michigan.
Yes.
Did you expect to go to high school?
No, I did not. A couple of my friends I'd met that summer, they said, well, we have room for you to ride. So then I talked to my parents, and they said, well, if you have a way to get there, because, we were 4 miles away. So I went to high school, and then in the middle of the year, we had a lot of snow, and so I got a job in town helping a couple out.
Yeah, you lived with another family in town?
Yes, with a man and a woman, and they had a hardware store. And I did the cooking and the cleaning and baking. I was trained to work.
You were trained to work. You were a hard worker, so you did all of that for this family and lived in town so that you could go to school. And you did this before school? Or a combination before and after?
I get up in the morning and I had to make breakfast and do the dishes. She loved prunes and whipped cream on them. I had to whip the cream.
Oh, good grief.
And do the dishes and have a pot of soup made before I went to school. Because when I came home for lunch, it was 2 blocks away, he was there for his lunch, and then I had to serve him and do his dishes. Then she came later. She was a really tough lady, but I showed her I could do it.
Well, you could do it. That's really incredible that a high school student is doing all that in addition to going to school.
It was incredible. I don't think a student should have had to work that hard.
Right, right. Now, you mentioned that at lunch, they would have the radio on, and you were able to listen to the news.
He came home from work, and he had a footstool in front of the radio, and while I was getting lunch on the table for him, we ate in the dining room, and there was a big radio in the living room. But he just kept saying, we've got to do something, we've got to do something. Hitler just can't take our country away from us. And he had a son that was an ROTC student, and he was a lieutenant. And he said, I know my son's going to have to be one of the first ones probably to go, but we cannot let Hitler get away with it.
So you were able to go to school, but you were very aware of the world news at this point because of this radio. That's quite an education for a young girl.
Well, we didn't have electricity where I lived until I was in the 10th grade. But this war, you know, I started school in 1929, and then with the banks, and then Hitler, and that. My whole elementary years was war.
Right, troubles, something going
It was
on.
very troublesome.
Oh my. Now, how much were you paid by this family a week, do you know?
Well, she didn't give me any money for working when I was in school, but then she paid me $4 a week.
Okay,
A couple of summers I worked for her.
okay. And what did you do with that $4 a week? You said something to me about helping your father.
Well, everybody was straying for money, and he had these livestock that had to go to a pasture because they had to be outside and water and that, and he found a spot, but it needed barbed wire, and they had an electric fence then, and he didn't have money to buy it, and I said, just take that money and buy your fence. I was not selfish. None of my family were selfish.
So you were just willing to help at
Oh,
this
yes.
particular point. Well, this says a lot about your family and about family commitment and love and trust for all of you working together as a team.
Well, my older brothers, they would always be together. They even were so close that when they went to Detroit to work, they all came home with the same suit on.
That's wonderful.
My dad was very fussy about them being dressed to go to church or to go out. And we would pick cherries. That one year I remember they picked cherries, and my dad said, everything we make on picking cherries, they had their farm work cleaned up pretty good. Cherry picking was 2 weeks of the year. He said, everything we get out of picking cherries, it all goes to my kids for their school clothes, and the older ones, their dress clothes. He never wanted them to go out of town or in town or in any place, church, without looking like gentlemen.
Well, I think that's a testament to him because that's quite a gentleman, as you say. Now, you were the first person of your family to ever graduate from high school. Were they all very proud of you? Did they come to the ceremony?
Oh, they came home from Detroit to see me graduate, give me a nice watch.
Oh, nice. Nice, especially since you weren't expecting to go. And suddenly you had made arrangements to get to 9th and 10th, and then you made arrangements to be in town working for 11 and 12. That's quite a commitment to
At
education.
11th and 12th, I came home. I came home and because my brother was old enough to go, and 2 of the neighbor kids, so then I could ride with them.
Okay,
It was so good to be home.
I'll bet. So you only lived with that family for 9th and 10th grades. Then
Yes.
11, 12, you were home, surrounded by people you loved, who didn't work you to death.
No, we were all a hard-working group.
Sure,
We all
sure.
had our jobs.
Now, what did you do when you finished high school? You graduated in June of 1941, and what did you do then?
Well, that's when I came to Muskegon.
Right, for what kind of a job?
We went to a dance every Saturday night, and someone from Muskegon came up and said that they were hiring. On Monday, we had to be down there.
And you worked at Amazon
And,
Knitting Company.
Yeah, then we came down, got a job, and I was there until my husband left.
Okay, well, so you were there, and at Amazon Knitting, this was a company that made underwear, and you said it was sold to the military and to all retail stores.
Every retail store that you heard of, they all had a mailing address. I walked to the mail room, and I just read the list, and I couldn't believe how many different companies that were purchasing their product.
Well, this is something that you and I have in common because, as I told you, in my summers before, when I was going to college, and in the summers I worked at Jockey Underwear. So you worked at Amazon Knitting, and I worked at Jockey Underwear. So we are both underwear people. Now, how much did you make at Amazon? Do you remember?
19 cents an hour.
19 cents an hour. And what you said you did something very special for your mother with your money that you
Well,
had.
she always wanted this bedspread, and it was on Ward's catalog. It was when the chenille came, and it had some colored chenille, and she just wanted it so bad. She'd get the money all there, then something would go wrong, and my dad said, "Could I borrow it?" "You'll get it when I get the cream check." And so it was never fuss about anything like that. My family Dad and Mother got along just beautiful. They're just happy people.
Good. So she always had to postpone that chenille bedspread until you bought it for her.
And I bought that for her.
Good for you. Now, who was your boss at Amazon Knitting?
My husband.
But he wasn't your husband then. He was just
No.
a good-looking George, right?
He was a sweetheart.
All right. And what did he tell me about him with his suggestion for hiring you?
When we went into that building, to the left was where the employment office was. We looked both ways because it's a large opening to the steps to go up where the office was, and he was in there seeing how many they had rehired, hired because they had fired them all because they were trying to get a union going. And he said, "There she is." And the lady told me a few weeks later, she said, your boyfriend was in my office, and he said, "There she is, and who is the girl I'm going to marry?" So when he first saw me, he said he was going to marry me.
He said, "Hire that pretty redhead." There it
And
was.
he said, "The brunette looks like their good friends hire her too."
So you didn't know him before. He had come from New York, but he is your boss at that particular
He's
point,
my
and you
boss.
guys fell in love.
When we went to the 5th floor, and they said we'd meet Mr. Keefe, and we were waiting to meet him, and all of a sudden the buzzer or whatever went off, and everybody in the knitting started knitting, and our boss wasn't around, and all of a sudden here he came, and the girls all said, "Wow." He was very neat and wore his clothes just really proper.
And he had fallen in love with you immediately.
And
Marry that redhead.
when he told his sister, she said, "You wouldn't." He said, "I am."
All right, well, that's a great thing. It's a nice way to start that romance. Now, to talk about World War II, you were 19 years old when Pearl Harbor was attacked.
Yes.
Do you remember hearing about that event? Where were you, or what were you doing?
I was coming out of the theater
With George.
on 3rd Street, with George.
Right.
And then he was Howard. His mother gave every one of her kids their middle name. And so I called him Howard.
Oh, okay.
And so after I said I would go to the movie with him, we then went every Saturday night to the movie. I was only a block away. And he was a block further on from me, so we didn't need any car. And we came out, and all of a sudden the paper boy was there that Japan had bombed Pearl Harbor. And then Franklin D. spoke up, and he said all automobiles are no more on the assembly line. Everything now that is starting on an assembly line is warfare material.
So you heard President Franklin Roosevelt, you said over the loudspeaker, you heard him speaking about all of
I
this.
heard that, yes.
And what was the reaction of the crowd, all the people on the street?
As they came out of that theater, they heard that and they just hugged and hugged and hugged. They just seemed like they never stopped hugging.
Right.
And it spread out as they were coming out in the middle of the street on 3rd Street and on Western Avenue, and some were crying, but they knew that their husbands or their boyfriends were going to be leaving.
Absolutely, it was a scary time.
It was very scary time.
Right, we were going to be now in this war. Before that, we were just helping to arm our allies, but now
Yes.
this was our war.
Now, the head man in Japan was in Washington, D.C., having a meeting with the president, and he said, I don't know if he even got back to Japan when the bombing went on.
Now, when you heard this, did anyone in your family, any of your brothers, immediately enlist in the Army? Was anyone drafted?
They were all registered, but then my older brother was drafted, and then later on, 3 more of them were drafted. My one brother worked as a tool maker at Continental in Muskegon, and they made tanks and things.
So he was deferred because of his job at
Yes.
Continental Motors.
They wanted him to stay there.
All right. And you remember hearing of boys in your class or friends trying to get out of their physicals. What did they do to raise their heartbeat, you said, or raise their heart rate?
The neighbor guy, they said that he, I'm not able to prove it, but he put a bar of soap under his armpit. Fels-Naphtha had a little something extra in it that really cleaned well, dirty jeans and that. And but they kept him overnight and tested his heart again. It wasn't racing because it made your heart race a little bit.
So Fels-Naphtha was maybe a shortcut to not getting drafted. Yeah, interesting.
But they kept him and he was drafted.
Oh, he was, yeah, so the trip didn't work.
No.
All right, now George, or are we calling him Howard or George, your husband?
He was Howard until he was in the service.
Okay, and he was drafted, you said, and then he enlisted into the Air Force, 1942?
Yes, number came up and he asked if he could be transferred to Albany because his friends were going in. I think he felt that he might be stationed with them, but I think if he'd have stayed in Muskegon, he probably would have maybe run up against him, but they separated them all.
All right.
And he went to Miami,
Okay.
and I don't know where his friends went, but he lived there in a big hotel on the beach in Miami. They had no lights at night, only in a bathroom that had no windows, because the what do you call the ships under the water?
Submarines.
Submarines were so close by. A lot of ships went down. As the GIs were going, I think they went more or less to Sicily in that route.
So when your husband, at that point, you were engaged to him. When he left for the service, you were left here at Amazon Knitting, and you told me it was no fun because your handsome boss was gone.
Well, I left when he left.
Yeah.
I just couldn't. Because he asked me to marry him before I even went out with him. He said, I know we're going to get married.
So anyway, he was gone in the service. You told me that your family said you were just moping around because you were missing him. And that's when you decided to go join your brother in Detroit, because Laverne was already working there.
Yes.
Right. And so he paid your way to Detroit, and that's what got you to Detroit, Michigan.
Yeah, he came and He was paying my expenses till I found work.
That's great. Now, you worked at the Woodall Plant. Now, tell me why it was so hard. How hard did you have to work to get a job at the Woodall?
I spent most of the summer looking for work because they had so much work to do to convert their manufacturing plants to war material.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked every day, and then I went downtown, and that's what they offered to give us, a group of us, a training down there. But I didn't know I'd ever get a job. But then one of the girls called me, and they said Woodall was hiring. So I went to Woodall's. Here I'm a girl from the farm, and I'm all over Detroit in streetcars.
Streetcars and buses and walking around, knocking on doors. You said you went back to the same places occasionally, saying, still, I'm looking for a
yes.
job. So you really worked hard at this.
I worked hard to get a job.
Right, right. And at the employment office, then, that's where you took some training classes to learn how to do what?
To rivet.
To rivet. And we have pictures of your notebook because you must have been having lectures because you were taking notes and you were doing measurements. You drew loads of pictures of what a rivet should look like, what a rivet shouldn't look like, how do you put it in. This notebook of yours is very, very complete. So you were taking night classes to learn how to rivet.
That was scary because I was alone going quite a ways down in a place I wasn't familiar with Detroit.
Right, right. Well, this is one of the things we have heard of all the Rosies that we interview. You were all so brave and so willing to do whatever had to be done to get a job. That is fabulous that you had the guts to do this, as you said.
But it took a lot of guts.
It took a lot of guts, and it took a lot of determination on your part to even get that job. I think that's incredibly important. Now, while you were living in Detroit, where did you and your brother live, or how did you live?
We lived, a lady rented us a room. She had a couple other rooms. And as one night my brothers came in from Hart and they woke us up. It was about 10 o'clock. And the lady that rented to us, her son was there the next night. We came home from work and he told us we weren't going to stay there any longer. We messed up the whole night before.
Because you were such party people, right?
Well, we were happy to see one another.
Of course.
And so it was on a Saturday night. I worked Saturdays, and so we got in a car. My girlfriend was also working with me, and my brother. We went to church, and then we went to a movie, all-night movie, and
Had to do something. You didn't have a house anymore.
and everything was in the trunk. It was kind of funny in a way.
Yeah.
And then on Sunday, we started looking for a place. And we were up near Boston and Chicago Boulevard. There was a lady that had an in-paper room. And we found a room and then like a little room that we could use for just lounging. My brother worked nights, and Marion and I worked daytimes. So we had the room at night, and he had it in the daytime.
That's what they call hot bedding, when everybody kind of uses the stuff when the other people aren't around. Now, did you have any laundry facilities there?
No.
No, you had to go to a laundromat or something?
We went to the laundromat.
Right, right.
Excuse me.
All right, so you had to eat out too because you didn't have did you have kitchen privileges?
No, it was just a sleeping room.
All right, so it was just for room. So you were having to use some of your salary that you were making to pay for food every day,
Yeah.
pay for laundry, and your brother was at the Ford Packard plant, you said.
It was Packard. It was
Yeah.
a big automobile.
Yeah, you told me yesterday it was the Packard plant, so I think you're right. And so you were at the Woodall plant. Now let's talk about your job. What did you get hired to do?
I got hired for putting parts of a floor together with riveting and drilling the holes.
The floor of an airplane.
Floor of an airplane, a box plane.
Okay, a box plane. So, and we have a picture of a box plane we're hoping will work to be put into your video. So you drilled holes and then
We had to burr
burr them.
and made sure that the inspector, that they were round,
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't need any air coming in there. And he inspected them, and they were right. But it was very serious.
Of course. Now you were a riveter and you had a bucker as part of your team.
Yes,
And did you ever do the bucking too?
I had.
All right, so the two of you switched back and forth, rivet and bucker,
It seemed like I was shooting the rivets more often.
most of the time. Okay, well, that's good. I think it's really incredible, though, that your name is Rosemary, and here you were a Rosie.
But
So you
that's
were
why
Rosie
that
the
guy
Riveter.
picked me. My son said, I got something to tell you. My mother was Rosie the Riveter.
Well, this is fabulous. Now, did you get any special training on the job there?
Not at Woodall, other than the job I was doing.
Right, okay. And you had done training at the employment office.
Down on Michigan, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what, I thought it was the employment office.
Right. Well, and you must have had lectures because you had a wonderful notebook again. We put that in to show us your drawings of pictures of good rivets and bad rivets and things that you had to do, measurements. So you had some serious training before you got to the job.
I didn't think that when I was getting the training, but I guess it was very important.
Right. Were you working on a moving assembly line?
No,
No. So what? Did you work
at
at
a table more or less.
a table? And did you have your own supplies there?
We had to go to tool room for everything.
The tool room.
Uh-huh.
All right. And so you picked up, because at night you would have to
Turn it on.
turn in your riveting gun and your things, and in the morning you came and
Back and went to the tool.
you got them all back at that point. Did you ever feel rushed?
No,
All right. Had they done work time studies or anything, time work studies on you?
we had a time study man for everything we did.
Really? Okay. But he didn't seem to put any pressure on you.
No.
He just looked at what you were doing,
Yeah.
timed it.
When we finished a piece, we had to report it to the time study.
Okay, interesting. Was it hard work? Did you think this riveting was hard?
No, we knew it was serious, but it wasn't hard.
All right? And everything was very carefully inspected.
Very much so.
Well, you wanted it done right because these were parts of airplanes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it noisy where you worked?
No, other than when we all got busy riveting, but a lot of them, it wasn't riveting by every table all the time because
Right.
they were burring and
Sure, yeah. But you had riveting noises around you all the time. Was the factory extra hot?
no,
Did you feel that you were cold?
no,
Do you remember? Was it dirty?
no.
And did you see the whole factory, or did you basically stay in your area?
We stayed in our area.
You stayed in your area, all right. And when you came in the morning, did you punch a time clock?
Yes, we did. And out at night.
Out at nights, and this is a proof that you were there and you put in all your hours. Mhm. And did you wear special identification badges?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Now, what shift did you work?
First,
Which was starting at what time?
7 in the morning.
And then went till about 3 or 4 in the afternoon,
Well,
probably?
I don't remember if a second shift came in. They must have, but they did work 9 hours, very little.
Okay, so mostly not quite 9
Women
hours.
could only work so many hours a week.
All right. And do you know how many days a week you worked?
Uh, 5 days.
5?
And some Saturdays we did
Okay.
have to come in.
All right, well, good. And in terms of getting there, what did you have to do? How did you get to work from where you were living?
Well, I had walked 2 blocks, got on a streetcar that took us straight over to Harper and Van Dyke. And there we got a bus and went to 6th Street, which is north, and got off the bus and walked in and got our raised donut and coffee at this little place, and a little further on, why, there was the place to work.
So you had all this traveling to do. You stopped for a little donut treat, and it took you, how long do you think, to get to work every day? Half hour, 45 minutes?
I'm closer to 45
45 minutes. And then at the end of the day, you had to reverse and go back this whole way.
Yes, we did.
Did you stop for another donut?
Sometimes I stopped at Woodward and had something to eat, but usually my brother was going to work a little bit later and we ate together.
Yeah, for dinners. You
I
ate
saw
dinner.
him for maybe an hour and a half before he went to work.
Do you remember eating lunch there at the factory ever? Taking a lunch or buying it?
I think most of the time we got it, somebody went out and got sandwiches or
Okay.
something.
All right, well, now in terms of special outfits, what did you wear while you were at the factory?
Just slacks and blouses.
Slacks and blouses. And how did you like wearing slacks?
It seemed pretty special. Never wore them before.
So this was the first time you had worn slacks. Yeah.
It just something that all the women were wearing for
Mhm.
protection, and
Very freeing. When you were off work, when you didn't work, were you wearing slacks then? Or did you go back to dresses?
oh, I put a dress.
Dresses and skirts.
on. Dresses and skirts.
We have some nice pictures of you as sitting there in your skirt that we will show on your video. Did you have to wear special safety glasses?
No.
How about, did you wear a headscarf or some kind of covering?
Well, we were supposed to keep our hair back.
Hair back, because you didn't want it caught.
They didn't want it caught in the
Right.
drill.
Now, didn't you tell me once about a blouse getting caught?
I had an extension drill because I had to get in a narrower spot. And when I took it out, it kind of caught my blouse, started twisting it. Then I quick shut it off.
So
I
you
didn't
were
want
not,
I didn't want anything going into my skin.
well, besides that, you also didn't want to be working without a blouse for the day, right?
Yeah,
Did you wear an apron?
no.
Okay, so you really didn't need big pockets or big aprons. As you needed rivets, you went and got them at the shop office or
When we
something?
had the holes
Mhm.
approved, then we went, ordered to the tool shed and got our
To the tool
room-
shed,
our
okay,
tool room,
good.
and got our rivets.
Did you have to join the union?
No.
No, all right. And can you remember how much you were paid?
I don't, $69 a week I think we got, but I don't remember.
Okay.
How many hours we worked for.
$69 a week is pretty good.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, was it pretty much check or cash, do you remember?
I think it was a check, because
Okay.
I'd give it to my brother, because he was off days,
Oh, okay.
and he would put it in the bank.
Sure, sure.
or Cash it.
Well, this $69 a week was certainly better than the 19 cents an hour at Amazon knitting.
It was a big improvement.
It was a big improvement. And speaking about this money, how did you spend your money? What did you do with it?
Oh, I went shopping. I bought my brothers, 3 of my brothers, they used to call them the car coats, car length coat.
Mhm.
3/4 or something like that. I'd buy gifts for my mother.
And you had to pay rent,
I paid rent.
and you had to eat
Eat
out
out.
and do your laundry. You had to pay for laundry facilities, right? The laundromat?
Yeah, well, I don't know if the prices shot up as fast as they do now
Yeah, that's true.
for more money you got.
Right. Now, and did you buy war bonds?
Yes, I did.
And were you glad that you did?
Very much so. Put us in an apartment and a few pieces of furniture, and later on we built a home.
So you were able to start housekeeping after the war with your war bond savings.
Yes.
Otherwise, you might have spent all that money on shoes. It's a good thing you saved some.
I did that later on in life.
All right. So your brother was working at the Ford Packard plant, and then you two would meet before he went in for his night shift. You were done with your day shift and have dinner.
I'd meet him. Sometimes I'd stay right on the streetcar and go a couple extra blocks, and we ate. I believe the Ford Hospital was over that area
Okay.
to the west of us.
Well, it's nice that you two were able to do this together.
He was very good to me. My brothers were all very good to me.
Speaking of that, now did you have nice supervisors? Because at Amazon you had this wonderful supervisor who you married.
He could see out the window
Right.
of his office and watch me work.
Oh, good grief! How about at at the Woodall plant?
The inspector was more or less the supervisor.
Okay.
There was one, I think, that was a supervisor, but he didn't show up much.
All right, but they were nice. They didn't give you trouble.
No.
Okay, that's wonderful. Now, after you came home from work at night, and then you'd meet your brother for dinner, or you came home in the afternoon, met your brother for dinner, what did you do with your evenings?
I usually was very tired, but I'd get on a streetcar and go up to Highland Park and shop. And on Mondays, we girls would go down to the city of Detroit, and we would listen to music, or we would sit in the Grand Circuit Park, and just sit there and relax, or go to a movie. To me, it didn't seem that important, but I was very privileged to have had a job in Detroit.
Right, and you said you went to the Fox Theater for movies and
Yeah.
walked around. You mentioned J.L. Hudson the last time we talked.
Went in there, J.L. Hudson's, and we went to the basement mostly because that was less expensive.
Okay.
And in SS Kurds, I think it was, but it's all gone now.
Well, I know Detroit has changed a lot, and you went to Sanders for ice cream. You remember that?
I don't remember so much going there for ice cream, but I did send a lot of packages.
Who did you send these packages to?
My boyfriend then.
And what kinds of things would be in those packages?
Oh, one package had a lot of nuts in it, and that's what he said. They put it on the table, and the GIs, they got rid of the ants or whatever they were.
Just
Ate
push
the nuts.
those bugs away and eat those nuts.
But I sent cookies and different things.
Nice. But for the most part, your nights were lonely. You were tired and you were alone and had to get up in the morning for work.
Yeah. One morning I got up, and I must have been dreaming, and got up and those 2 blocks and stood there waiting for the streetcar, and there was another car that kept going around the block and around the block, and I finally spotted a clock, and it was in the middle of the night,
Oh, good grief.
and I ran home as fast as I could.
Sure. Just confused.
It was the only time that ever happened to me.
Now, do you remember the young women that worked with you were mostly single, so you don't remember them needing child care or help with their young families?
No, I think 3 got married.
Okay. But they didn't have children at
There
that
were
point.
people there that I worked with from Wisconsin up to the northeast corner of the Lower Peninsula.
Okay. And did you work with any black women?
There were no black people that I knew of worked
Okay,
there.
but you had trained with some when you were
Yeah.
doing your training. Were you ever afraid of taking the streetcars and buses during these years? Because you were there in 1943, which was when the race riots
Yes, I was.
happened in
It
Detroit.
was a very serious thing then. That was the only uprising I ever heard of.
Right, and you weren't hurt or anything. But did it worry you taking the streetcars or buses during that time?
Well, I went to work and I hadn't heard of it. And one of the friends that told me about going there that I could probably get employment, she had a black guy, and I don't know if it was some riding problem or what it was. And I stayed in Centerline that night because I was afraid to go home.
Oh.
And I know my brother was at work and he would miss me.
Well, Detroit had changed during those years because there were huge migrations from the South in the 1940s. And then Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 8802 in 1941, which outlawed discrimination in the hiring of
Yeah.
defense plans. So there was a lot of tension in Detroit, and these 43 riots started at Belle Isle and spread out through the neighborhoods. But I'm glad you weren't really affected by it too much, and you weren't hurt or it didn't scare you at that
No,
point.
once I got on the streetcar in Harper and Van Dyke, I went right straight home.
Okay.
But some of the streetcars that went down Woodward and some of the other areas, they tried to rock them over
Right.
and throw stones in the windows. But I didn't see any of
Okay,
that.
good. I'm glad you were safe. Now let's talk about something happier. What about your marriage? When did you marry this George Howard Keefe?
August of 43.
August of 43, so you had a war wedding. And where were you married?
He came in and he said, let's get married. Every time he came home, it was getting married. Since the second week I was started going with him, he told me he was going to marry me before I went out with him. And we went home and we had a nice marriage.
You were married in the church?
In
You were
the church and
at St. Joseph Church
in Weir.
in Weir.
And so we went and got our blood tests, and I don't know where he found the ring, but
And you found your dress where did you buy your dress?
Hamtramck, the Polish, had a lot of dress shops. And I couldn't find one that fit me, and they had one they were making. And they had it all done but hemming. They said, oh, we'll make another one for the other girl. So I booked that.
You walked in, walked out with a dress, and they had to make a new one for someone else. So you were married in St. Joseph Church, and that's where you had been baptized, where you worshiped all the time, where you grew up, you went to school there. This was a very important church in your life.
It was. It's a beautiful church.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small church, but it looks like a cathedral.
Isn't that wonderful? And your husband George is buried there.
Yes, and my headstone is
Your headstone.
on his headstone.
Okay, so St. Joseph is going to again be very important for you. And then you went from the church to, you had a brunch at your home, or your parents' home.
Yes.
And then what did you do for dinner? Where did you go after you got married?
Well, then we went back to Muskegon. I left home
Mhm.
because his time was so short.
Right.
And we went back to Muskegon. We stayed at the Occidental Hotel.
Good.
And we stopped and visited the guy that we always went and had coffee at his place.
Mm-hmm.
And he called a friend, and we were invited out to dinner the next night. And then we had to leave for Detroit because he had to get on the train and go back to Seymour Johnson.
Well, so he went back to his base, you went back to work, and did he ever get shipped overseas? Did he see any military
No.
action?
He saw no military action. everything he needed in his duffel bag was on the ship. And he came home to tell us that he was going overseas. And just before he left there in Michigan, he got a telegram that he'd go back to Seymour Johnson Field, that he was no longer on a list to be shipped because he had been so long in the service.
Good.
And we were very happy about that.
Now, he was an Air Force chef.
Yes.
Did he ever cook for you after the war?
He did some. Well, he did it a lot right up until he passed away. Would go out and make a sandwich or something and bring it to me and say, just stay in the chair.
Good, that's nice.
He worked hard enough all
right.
day.
And one time you said you got a mixer, and he said, that's it.
Now I'm going to make you some good cakes, and he never made one after.
Well, there it is. Okay. Now, while we think about this, you stopped working in Woodard at Woodall in 1943 because you said you were married, you were pregnant, you wanted to be
I
with
wasn't
him.
pregnant
Oh, you
then.
weren't married. You just wanted to be with George. So you
Yeah.
left work and went down to the base.
Well, I'd get 2, 3, 4 letters a day
Oh
from
my.
him.
Okay, then
He
was
wrote to
lonely.
me constantly.
All right. Now, that's great. And you were able to join him down there, and that kept everybody happy. And then you had your baby, George Jr., was born in Michigan.
Yes.
Okay. And then coming back on the train, did you have a very interesting experience of
Yes.
changing a diaper?
Yes, we were in Washington, D.C., waiting to be transferred to another train, and I took George into the president's office and changed his diaper.
Now, what president are you talking about?
Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Franklin Roosevelt. You took him, you took your baby into President Roosevelt's office at the train station.
And changed his clothes on the diaper on his Franklin's desk.
That's unbelievable. A little piece of history right there. That is fantastic
That's
at this
what
point.
they tell me.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. And then you and George, when the war was over, came back to Michigan and you raised 7 children here in Muskegon, right?
Right.
Isn't that fabulous? And you're proud of all of them. Yeah.
Well, they've all got a good education and good parents.
They're good parents. It's
Raising
wonderful.
their children, most
So-
of them are through college. And
How many grandchildren do you have?
I had 23 grandchildren, but add up all my grandchildren's killed. I don't know, it's in the 40s.
Oh
I
my,
think.
well, you're 97 years old. You've got a big family. That's great.
I've got great-grandchildren.
And great grandchildren. I love it.
That Brett was my great-grandchild.
Now, what is your overriding impression of the war years? When you think back in the 1940s, what comes to mind about that time period?
The man was out of his mind.
Hitler.
Hitler. It was the most terrible thing, and the radio, I got to tell in Muskegon, I was where we could get the newspaper. We did take the Grand Rapids Press when I was in grade school. It was read to us every night. It was laid on the kitchen table and read the articles that they figured we needed to hear.
That's good. You were always with the news. You told me that your overriding really impression of this was how much you hated war. You never want to get involved in this again. Don't want any of your family involved.
It was supposed to end all wars.
Absolutely. World War I was to end all wars, but World War II was certainly to end it, and unfortunately we didn't. Now, what would you say, how would you summarize your time as a Rosie?
I enjoyed life.
Mm-hmm.
There was one thing I didn't tell you, and that was my dad hired German men that they brought over to here, the soldiers.
Prisoners of war to Michigan, yeah.
At clay banks up by Shelby.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad had to hire those guys to harvest his crops because his sons were in the service.
Right. Many of the prisoners worked on the farms in different places here. Yes, they did. Now, in terms of being a Rosie, you you know, you said you were proud of doing this, and this was important. All of you became good friends, and you were trying to bring these husbands and boyfriends home.
That was it.
That was it. Did you feel you were doing something incredibly important?
I did.
Good.
These guys that went overseas, they didn't want to leave their loved ones
Mhm.
behind, and so we wanted to finish that war and get them home.
Perfectly way to do it. Good way. So you've lived for 97 years, lots of hardship, the Depression, the war, you raised 7 kids, and you've done a good job. So in closing, Rosemary, let me thank you for sharing your interesting story with us. Thank you for giving your strength and patriotic energy to America in the 1940s and for doing your part to help win the war. You have made a difference in this world, and you are truly a heroine. The tribute Rosies from the Yankee Air Museum at the historic Willow Run B-24 bomber plant are honored to send your story to many museums around our country as part of the National Veterans History Project. Thank you.